I'm Sophia Mercer. For 10 years, I poured my soul into my family's struggling winery, transforming it from a forgotten vineyard into an award-winning estate. Then one morning, I walked into a board meeting to discover my name had been removed from the succession plan. My father, brother, and uncle sat watching as I realized they'd voted me out while I was securing our biggest international contract. They didn't think I'd discover the betrayal until it was too late, but I always read the fine print. And now they're learning what it means to lose the only person who truly built their legacy. The morning air was cool against my skin as I walked between the rows of Cabernet vines. 10 years ago, when I returned from business school to find my family's century-old vineyard on the brink of bankruptcy, these vines were withered, neglected. Mercer Estates had been reduced to selling bulk grapes to larger producers, our family name fading from labels and memories alike. I ran my fingers along the leaves, remembering how I'd convinced my father to let me try saving what 4 generations had built. "Just give me 5 years," I'd promised. He'd laughed, that dismissive chuckle that always made me stand straighter. "The wine business isn't for dreamers, Sophia. It's for men who understand tradition." But I wasn't dreaming. I was calculating. I'd spent those business school years studying sustainable agriculture, modern marketing, and global wine distribution. While my brother Thomas enjoyed his executive title without responsibility, I developed a complete reinvention plan for Mercer Estates. 5 years became 10. 10 years of dawn-to-dusk work, 10 years of modernizing production, rebuilding our reputation bottle by bottle, trade show by trade show. 10 years of endless resistance from my father when I suggested new techniques, new markets, new anything. "That's not how your grandfather did it," became his reflexive response, yet he cashed the checks when our revenue tripled. He accepted awards for his visionary approach when critics praised our renaissance. He beamed in photographs when celebrities began requesting our reserve bottles at events. I stepped out of the vineyard and checked my watch. The board meeting, just family members, really would start in an hour. Today I was presenting the final details of our Japanese distribution deal. After 2 years of negotiations, I'd secured exclusive placement in Tokyo's most prestigious restaurants and retailers. It would increase our profits by 40% and elevate Mercer Estates to truly international status. In my office, I straightened the presentation materials and touched the small velvet box in my desk drawer. Inside was a vintage Mercer label from 1932, my great-grandfather's first award-winning year. I'd had it framed for my father, a peace offering of sorts. Despite everything, I wanted him to feel proud of what we'd accomplished together. I should have known better. The boardroom had an unusual energy when I entered. My father Charles sat at the head of the table, silver hair perfectly combed, his signet ring catching the light as he drummed his fingers. Thomas lounged beside him, scrolling through his phone with practiced boredom. Uncle Richard's eyes darted away when I met his gaze. "Before Sophia begins," my father announced as I took my seat, "we need to address some structural changes to the company." He slid a document across the polished table. "The board has voted to restructure the executive leadership and succession plan. Thomas will be assuming the role of CEO effective next month, with Richard stepping in as COO. I stared at the paper, the words swimming before my eyes. My name, previously listed as the successor CEO and current executive director, had been completely removed. In its place was a new position, brand ambassador, reporting to Thomas. "This is a joke," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's business," Thomas replied, finally looking up from his phone. "The Japanese deal is impressive, but we need traditional leadership moving forward. The Mercer name has always passed through the male line." "The Mercer name would be extinct if not for me," I said quietly. "The bank was 3 months from foreclosure when I came back." I turned to my father. "You haven't even seen the final terms of the contract. This will put us in a different league entirely." My father cleared his throat. "About that, we've decided to pause on international expansion. Thomas feels we should focus on domestic growth first." "Thomas feels?" I echoed. "Thomas hasn't felt anything about this business except entitlement. When was the last time he visited the production floor or met with a distributor? Or could tell you the difference between our eastern and western slope Merlots?" Thomas smiled thinly. "That's why we have staff, Sophia. A CEO delegates. A CEO leads, I corrected. Something you've never done. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Sophia, be reasonable. You'll still have an important role. Your customer relationships are valuable, and you'll continue as the face of Mercer at events. The face, but not the brain. The smile, but not the signature. I gathered my presentation materials with deliberate calm. How long have you been planning this? The silence answered before any of them could. This wasn't an impulse decision. This was calculated, timed perfectly for when they thought I'd be too invested in the Japanese deal to walk away. You should know, I said, standing, that the contract has a key person clause. I am personally named as the executive contact. If I leave, they can void the entire agreement. My father's expression hardened. You wouldn't damage the family business out of spite. I looked at him, this man who had taught me both ambition and disappointment in equal measure. It stopped being about family the moment you decided I wasn't really part of it. I walked out without another word, leaving the contract and the gift for my father behind. In my office, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply sat at my desk and began to make calls, first to my attorney, then to Akira Tanaka, my Japanese counterpart. I explained the situation with clinical detachment. I understand completely, Akira said after a thoughtful pause. In Japan, we respect loyalty and honor above all. If your family has broken their trust with you, how could we trust them to honor our agreement? By evening, news had spread through the small community that surrounds any notable winery. My phone buzzed with text messages from other winemakers, distributors, even competitors. The wine world is smaller than most people realize. Reputation means everything. I drove home to my small house on the edge of the Estatia property I'd purchased independently. Thank goodness. Through the kitchen window, I could see the rolling hills of vines stretching toward the horizon, transformed by my decade of care from struggling plants to proud, productive rows. The next morning, Thomas called. What did you say to Tanaka? He demanded, skipping any greeting. The truth, I replied, that the person they've been negotiating with no longer represents Mercer Estates. They've pulled out completely. Father is furious. I imagine he is. You need to fix this, Sophia. Call them back. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I laughed softly. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a miscalculation, yours. You thought I would stay and smile and pour wine for your potential clients while you took credit for my work. That particular vintage has run dry. I hung up and blocked his number. Over the next week, I received calls from every board member except my father. Uncle Richard came closest to an apology. We didn't handle this well, he admitted. But you have to understand, Charles is old-fashioned. He always intended for Thomas to take over eventually. Then he should have let Thomas build the business, I replied, instead of watching me do it while you all waited to take it away. 2 weeks after the board meeting, I received an unexpected visitor. Elena Vasquez, owner of the neighboring Rivera Vineyards, arrived at my door with a bottle of her award-winning Chardonnay. I heard, she said simply, stepping inside. The whole valley is talking. Elena had been a mentor to me when I first returned one of the few female vineyard owners who had succeeded on her own terms. Now, in her 60s, she ran one of the most respected boutique operations in the region. I'm still processing, I admitted as we sat on my porch overlooking the valley. Process quickly, she advised, pouring 2 glasses. Because I have a proposal for you. Elena's offer was straightforward. Her children had chosen other paths, leaving her without a successor for Rivera. She had been considering selling to a large conglomerate, but hated the thought of her carefully nurtured vines becoming part of some corporate portfolio. I need someone who understands both the soul and business of wine, she said, someone who can honor what I've built while taking it somewhere new. You're offering me Rivera? I asked, stunned. I'm offering you a partnership, she clarified. 3 years working together, then you take majority ownership. I keep 30% and a seat on the board until I decide to fully retire. My father will see it as a betrayal, I said, already knowing I would accept. Elena shrugged. Sometimes the only way to remain loyal to yourself is to walk away from those who never deserved your loyalty in the first place. We shook hands that afternoon. By evening, the papers were drawn up by her attorney. A strange calm settled over me in the days that followed. I formally resigned from Mercer Estates, clearing my office on a Sunday when I knew the building would be empty. I left behind a detailed transition document for every project I had managed, every relationship I had cultivated. Not for them, for the staff who would be caught in the chaos. The only personal item I took was a soil sample from the Eastern Vineyard, the first section I had rehabilitated, the one that now produced our most acclaimed wines. Some roots you take with you, no matter where you're transplanted. My father finally called 3 days after the Rivera partnership was announced in the industry press. "You couldn't wait a month before betraying this family," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I learned from experts," I replied. "That woman is our competitor. And now, so am I." The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we'd never properly said. "Your grandfather would be ashamed," he finally said, reaching for the knife he thought would cut deepest. "My grandfather was an innovator who changed with the times," I countered. "The only tradition you're upholding is the one where men take credit for women's work. I doubt he would recognize that as part of his legacy." I heard him inhale sharply. For a moment, I thought he might actually say something honest, something real. Instead, he simply said, "Goodbye, Sophia," and hung up. That conversation was 6 months ago. Since then, life has moved with the rhythm that only agricultural businesses truly understand: a mixture of urgent activity and patient waiting, of science and art, of control and surrender. Elena and I have already begun implementing changes at Rivera. Our first collaborative vintage will be bottled next year, under a new reserve label we designed together. Advance orders have exceeded our projections, fueled partly by industry curiosity about our partnership and partly by the reputation I built at Mercer. Last week, I heard that Mercer Estates lost their national distributor, the one I had secured through 3 years of relationship building. Thomas apparently showed up unprepared to their annual review meeting. The company's stock has dropped 15% since my departure, and rumor has it they've hired a crisis management consultant. I take no pleasure in their struggles. Well, perhaps a small, human measure of vindication. But mostly I feel something unexpected: freedom. For a decade, I poured everything into resurrecting a legacy that was never truly meant to include me. Now I'm building something that belongs to me from the start. No asterisks, no conditional belonging, no waiting for permission to lead. Yesterday, I walked through Rivera's heritage Zinfandel block at sunset. These vines, some over 60 years old, have weathered drought and frost, pests and disease. They've been pruned harshly and still returned stronger. Their roots run deep into the stony soil, drawing up minerals that give our wines their distinctive character. I knelt and pressed my palm against the gnarled trunk of the oldest vine. This, I thought, is resilience. Not the absence of wounds, but the strength to grow through them, to transform them into something beautiful and lasting. Elena found me there as darkness fell. She didn't speak, just handed me a glass of our newest blend, a bold, unexpected combination of traditional and modern techniques. We sipped in companionable silence as the first stars appeared. "To new roots," she finally said, raising her glass. I smiled and raised mine in return. "And to knowing when to transplant them?" Sometimes the most painful endings make way for the truest beginnings. Sometimes you have to leave what you've built to become what you're meant to be. And sometimes, when a door is closed in your face, the only appropriate response is to build your own house with a better view. I don't know if my father and brother will ever truly understand what they lost, not just my expertise or the contracts I secured, but the future I envisioned for our family's legacy. That vision now belongs to Rivera, to Elena, to me. Some might call it revenge, this success rising alongside their struggle. I call it reclamation. Of my worth, my talent, my right to lead. The best revenge isn't just success, it's success that remains true to who you are, even when others failed to value it. The wine world is watching us now, this unexpected partnership between Elena's traditional wisdom and my modernizing instincts. What they're witnessing isn't just two women defying industry norms. They're seeing what happens when someone focuses more on nurturing roots than maintaining appearances. Have you ever had to walk away from something you loved because staying meant diminishing yourself? Have you found the courage to transplant your talents somewhere they could truly flourish? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe for more reflections on resilience, reinvention, and the courage to begin again. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we dare to rewrite for ourselves.